It was a nice autumn night, a little chilly but clear. My family and I decided to have a campfire out by the edge of our property. We lived on several acres, and the campfire pit was set up right next to the woods near our old playground. It was far from the house, but we'd used it many times before and never had any problems. We waited until it was dark, then brought out folding chairs, blankets, and snacks. My dad started the fire while my mom helped my little brother with marshmallows. My sister and I sat near the fire talking and making s'mores. After a while, maybe an hour or two in, we heard a sound coming from the woods. It was leaves crunching and a stick snapping. We paused, but figured it was a raccoon or a deer. We get animals out there all the time, so we didn't think much of it. A little later, we heard it again, this time closer. It didn't sound like it was an animal this time. It sounded like footsteps, like somebody walking through the brush. We all went quiet and listened. Then we heard somebody cough, confirming that it was definitely a person. My dad stood up and looked towards the woods. He pulled out his flashlight and shined it towards the trees. A few seconds passed, then we saw him. There was a man standing between the trees, just far enough that we couldn't see his face. Then the light hit him and he ducked behind a tree. We froze and no one said anything. He didn't move or come out again, but we knew that he was there, watching. Without a word, my dad turned and told us to go. We left everything by the fire pit, blankets, food, chairs, everything. I don't think I've ever run that fast in my life. Once we were inside the house, my dad locked every door and checked every window. We all stayed in the living room waiting to see if the man followed us. He never came out of the woods, at least not that we saw. Later that night, while we were still trying to calm down, my sister and I recalled an experience that we told our parents. A few weeks earlier, we had gone hiking on a trail not far from our place. There was a guy there too, alone, walking behind us at a weird pace. He didn't have a dog or hiking gear, just jeans and a jacket. Every time we stopped, he stopped. Eventually, we hurried back to the car and he vanished off the trail. We didn't think much of it at the time, just a strange guy in the woods. But after what happened that night at the campfire, we wondered if it was the same person. We never found out because we never saw his face. He never came back after that night either, or at least we don't think he did. But after that night, we stopped doing campfires after dark. From then on, we only did them in the daytime, and my dad moved the fire pit closer to the house too, just in case. When I moved up near the Arctic Circle with my husband, I was about 5 months pregnant. It was late fall, and we were waiting for our new house to be finished. Until then, we were staying at a small hotel with detached rooms tucked up near a stretch of forest. It wasn't much, but it was clean and quiet. I liked it. The cold was creeping in, but I still took daily walks with my dog Storm. He's a big, mellow guy, good with people, and curious about animals. I was getting used to the changes in my body and trying to stay active without overdoing it. I'd walk until I reached this narrow clearing in the forest and then turn back. It was peaceful. Storm always played in the leaves while I caught my breath. We never saw anyone else on those walks. No other dogs, no people, no cars nearby. Just trees and quiet. One day my husband had the day off, and he said he wanted to come with us. He just bought a new gun, it was common up here, and he wanted to get used to carrying it. We followed my usual path through the trees. Storm ran ahead like always. When we got close to the clearing, Storm suddenly stopped, blocked my path, and started growling. At first, I thought it might be an animal, but he usually tries to herd or chase an animal. I followed his gaze into the trees. There were heads, not moving, and peeked out from behind the trees. They were maybe 10 paces from where I usually turned back on my own. I grabbed Storm by the collar, but I didn't want him to charge. When I turned to say something to my husband, he already had his gun out and raised. I couldn't make out any features of the faces, just shapes. I couldn't tell if they were men or women. My husband didn't move at first, but he slowly lowered the gun and nodded to me. We turned and walked back without running, but I felt cold all over. Storm kept looking back, ears flat. They didn't follow us. Back at the hotel, we locked the door and didn't go out again until we moved rooms closer to our house. I never walked that trail again. Later on, I talked to someone in town who grew up in the area. When I mentioned the forest, she just nodded and said something about there being a lot of weird old cults around there. We moved into our house soon enough before the winter came and had no further forest encounters. This happened in 2014. My friends and I were 15 or 16 years old and living in our local town. We were a bit mischievous as a friend group at the time, and we would often be trying to find or get our hands on alcohol. It was autumn as I remember us being wrapped in warm clothing. It was getting dark out early, and we would be hanging out at the parks around town. We eventually got our hands on some vodka, and then we headed to the large park in the center of town. This park is well lit on many paths, but being nervous underage drinkers, we headed as far into the open grass as possible so as to not be seen. I don't remember any of us noticing anybody around as we entered, which made sense as it was getting darker and it was a chilly evening. We sat in a circle, about 6 of us, all girls, and passed around the bottle and played some drinking games. We spent about half an hour drinking and we were laughing and having a good time. All of a sudden, we heard a phone ring. I asked whose it was, as I didn't recognize the ringtone. Everybody looked to their bags, but it was none of our phones. We then noticed in the distance closer to the path, maybe about 30 feet away, a silhouette. This person put their hand in their pocket and took out a phone, which was the source of the ringing. We all went silent as we watched this figure's movements, and at the same time, we attempted to hurriedly shove our belongings into our bags and get to our feet. Before we were all ready to move away, the person started walking towards us. I mostly remember one friend shouting, "Run," and we all followed her lead. At first, being lazy and a little drunk, I wondered to myself if running was really necessary. It was probably just somebody telling us to leave the park. The closest exit to the park was up a steep hill. Trying to keep pace with my friends, I looked behind me, hoping to see this stranger back on the path so I could stop running. Any doubt I had with our reaction was instantly dissipated when I saw this figure sprinting after us full bore up the hill. I shouted that we were being chased, and none of us looked behind us or slowed down until we were out of the park and some distance down the well-lit street. We never worked out exactly what happened, but I remember that I did not tell my mom about it. A year or two later, a man was killed in that park in an unprovoked attack. I think I had made myself forget and suppress the incident from the previous fall somewhat after finding that out. This happened last October. I live in a small town in upstate New York, and every fall my sister and I go apple picking. It's a tradition, and we go to this orchard about 20 minutes outside of town. It's family run, not too crowded, and they make good caramel apples. That Sunday we got there around 10 a.m. The sky was overcast and there was a chill in the air. The parking lot was half full. We brought my nephew, who's 5, I'll call him Tyler. It was supposed to be a short trip. Pick a few bags, grab some caramel apples, and head home. We paid for our bags and walked past the little farm store into the orchard. The apples were a bit picked over, so we had to walk farther to find the good ones. Tyler ran ahead like he always does. We were in the 3rd row of trees when a man came towards us from the far end. He looked like anyone else. Jeans, hoodie, ball cap, probably in his mid-30s. No bag or bucket though, which stood out. He walked past us without saying anything, just gave a small nod. I figured he was with someone. 10 minutes later, we heard Tyler calling. Not shouting though, just his normal voice, like he was talking to someone. I walked around the end of a row and didn't see him. I called his name and got no answer. I told my sister to stay put and started walking faster down the row. I passed a couple of other families and asked if they'd seen a little boy in a red jacket. One of them said they saw him go towards the back of the orchard. That's when I started to panic. The rows get more spread out in the back, and there's a small clearing near the edge of the woods. There's no fence there. The property just sort of fades into trees and brush. I found Tyler standing next to the man we'd seen earlier. The guy was crouched down, holding something out to him. It looked like a toy. Tyler wasn't touching it, just staring, and the man didn't notice me right away. I yelled, "Tyler, come here." The man stood up fast. He smiled and said something like, he got turned around and I was just helping him find his mom. But Tyler hadn't said he was lost. Tyler's not shy, and he would have called for us or walked back if he was lost. He knew to stay close. I grabbed Tyler and backed away. The guy didn't follow us, but just stood there watching us go. When we got back to the main path, I told one of the workers. He radioed someone, and they went to look. We waited near the barn with Tyler. About 15 minutes later, a staff guy came back and said they couldn't find the man. We filed a report with the sheriff that afternoon. They took it seriously because it turned out there had been another report a week earlier from the same orchard and that same kind of guy. Nobody was hurt, but a little girl said a man asked her to help him find his lost dog. The orchard had to put up cameras, and I'm not sure what happened since then. I haven't been back yet. I don't think the guy was just being helpful. I saw the look on his face before he turned around. He wasn't surprised to see me, he was annoyed, like I'd interrupted him. It made me realize how easy a kidnapping at an orchard could be though, with all the trees and a lot of space between people. I'm more aware of the areas I bring my nephew to now. This is a creepy story that my roommate and I experienced in the fall of our freshman year of college. For context, me and my best friend met in high school and roomed together in college. We were city kids, but went to college out in the country. The campus was secluded from the highway and was surrounded by woods. Our freshman year, we shared a typical cinder block dorm room. 2 single beds, 2 desks, 2 dressers, and a closet with no doors, which had a cutout on the top of it for storage containers. There was enough space for somebody to climb up and sit up there if they wanted to, and we often did. One night, as usual, we stayed up late playing video games and talking for hours. We talked about school and dream jobs and all kinds of stuff. My friend suddenly changed his tone as he told me he was having these recurring dreams that were freaking him out. In the dream, he was walking in the woods and came across a porcelain doll that for whatever reason was very unnerving to him. Every time he went to pick it up, he would suddenly wake up in a panic, like you do when you dream that you're falling. I could see that it was bothering him, but I didn't think anything of it. I told him he was probably thinking too much into it, and it would probably pass in time. This was my opinion on the matter until a few days later, I started having the same dream. One night we both had the dream at the same time, and we both woke up sweating and scared. This happened on a Thursday night, and we decided that since the next day was Friday and we both had a light schedule, we would take our bikes on a ride in the woods near our campus. We needed some time outdoors in the nice fall weather to enjoy nature and the changing scenery. Class ended and we got lunch at the cafeteria. Then we hopped on our bikes and rode to the trail that led to the woods. As we were riding, we remarked the whole time how similar the dream we had been having was to the woods we were currently in. We rode for an hour, and we could feel the tension and uncomfortable vibes increasing the deeper we went on the trail in the woods. Eventually, we stopped when we saw something laying on the ground on the side of the trail. It was a porcelain baby doll with a green dress and bonnet. It was an exact match to the dream we were both having. We both felt really creeped out to the point where we were dripping in sweat, even though it was a cool and overcast autumn day. The most unnerving thing was that the doll was in pristine condition, completely unaffected by the dirt and mud around it. Quickly we looked at each other, and without a word spoken, we agreed that it was time to leave. We hopped on our bikes and took off for campus. Neither of us could sleep that night, so we put on a movie. Eventually, we passed out. In the early morning hours, we both woke up and heard a girl giggling. We both thought that maybe a girl had snuck in, but that wasn't the case. We heard a voice say, "Hey, up here," and looked up to the storage cutout above the closet. A red-headed girl in a white dress and an indistinguishable face sat there expressionless. We just stared. In a passive voice, she said, "Why did you leave me there?" Neither of us could speak. The girl screamed this time, "Why did you leave me there?" In a flash, everything on the storage cutout fell to the floor and broke open. The noise was unnaturally loud, so loud that it woke our neighbors up next door, who were also good friends. They knocked on the door from the adjoining bathroom and entered the room. We had no way of explaining to them what happened. We thought they'd think we were crazy, so we told them we thought the base of the cutout broke and dumped our stuff on the floor. They accepted the story, and we spent the remainder of the night cleaning the mess. We never went back in those woods the rest of our time at school. The dream kept occurring, but the frequency of it slowed down and eventually stopped. To this day, as close of friends as we are, we don't talk about the doll in the woods and the redhead girl in fear of having the dream again. I have lived in the Appalachian Mountains my whole life in the thick woods. Growing up there felt like stepping back in time. We had endless expanse of forests as our playground and our imaginations as our guide. My best friend and I would spend hours exploring the dense woods behind my house, following animal tracks, climbing trees, and discovering hidden creeks. In autumn, when the leaves turned and fell, clearer paths would be revealed, and we would push a little deeper each day. We generally always stayed close enough to my house in the distance though, since that was our parents' rules. One day we wanted to go farther and thought of a setup to do it. We brought twine and other supplies that day, winding it around tree trunks so we'd find our way back. We kept walking deeper than we'd ever gone before, until we reached a strange old tree that split in two, like a giant slingshot rising from the ground. Right next to it, half hidden in the hillside beneath a pile of leaves and branches, was a rusty handle. As we brushed away the leaves, we realized it was attached to a heavy wooden door embedded in the earth, clearly being there for a long time. My friend and I both tugged on the handle, and the door finally broke, revealing steps leading down into pitch blackness. The thrill of finding something new and cool was so high that we didn't even hesitate before going down there with a flashlight. When we reached the bottom, we found ourselves in a small, cramped room. We think it was just an old bomb shelter or something. In the middle of the floor was a single worn photograph. I held it up to our flashlight, and we saw the photo was of two children, both girls, standing in front of an older version of my house. The outside of the house and surrounding yard looked a little bit different, but it was the same house that my family lived in. We put the photo back down on the ground where we found it and eventually headed back up the stairs again. When we reached the top, we looked around, but our path of twine was gone, as if someone or something had unraveled it. We blindly ran back through the forest, finally reaching my house. We burst through the door breathless and wide-eyed, my parents immediately noticing that something was wrong. We explained to them that we had gotten lost in the woods, but we also talked about the door and the photograph of our house that we had found. My dad was curious to see this place, and he convinced my mom to come with also. With my parents in tow, we spent a while retracing our steps through the woods, following what we remembered of the path. We never once saw any pieces of our twine we had set up earlier, but we did finally spot the twisted, slingshot-shaped tree which was near the door. We all went down the stairs in the bunker-like room again, but when we got to the bottom, the photograph from earlier was nowhere to be seen. We looked everywhere, but to no avail. That day still gives me the creeps, considering there had only been a 2 or maybe 3 hour gap between the visits to the shelter, and the photograph had vanished in that short amount of time. It was in the early 2000s, and the exact reason I was driving that night escapes me now. But one autumn night at around 8 p.m. when it was already dark, I took a right turn off the main highway. It was a small neighborhood nestled between two cities of about 100,000 people each. The rain was coming down hard, and my wipers were on medium. I wasn't in a hurry, just driving, when I came around a bend in the road to a neighborhood with maybe 40 houses, a small cul-de-sac development. I remember approaching the bend and seeing a woman. She was about 20 feet ahead, standing at the end of a driveway, lit up by my headlights. She was wearing a tank top and jeans, her arms crossed tight around herself like she was trying to warm up. She was staring directly at me, not the car, but at me. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but my first thought was that she needed help. I was young, just trying to be a good guy, so I slowed down and rolled down my passenger side window. My car didn't have power windows, so I had to lean over and crank it down. She could see that I had to roll it down, and as I opened it just a few inches, she did something strange. She reached out with her hand and grabbed the top of the window, her fingers coming so close to my face that it startled me. At first, I didn't know what to think. I had asked if she was okay, but she didn't answer. I could see her face now. She was young, probably 18 to 22, her eyes red from crying, and her breath coming in gasps between sobs. I asked again, "Are you all right? Is everything okay?" She didn't respond, and she didn't even move. She just kept staring at me, tears streaming down her face, her fingers still gripping at the top of the window. The silence between us felt heavy. It was like she was in a different world, not hearing me, not even acknowledging that I was there. I thought that maybe she was just in shock, and maybe she needed help more than I could understand. So I offered her a ride, thinking that I could take her somewhere, help her out, but she didn't react. Not even a nod. She just kept crying, staring right at me. I felt like I was in a staring contest with someone who had lost their own mind. I don't know how long I sat there, but it felt like forever. I glanced down the road ahead, not sure what to do. Then I looked back at her, and something shifted inside me. I didn't know what was going on with her, but something about the whole thing felt wrong, like I was supposed to walk away. The tension in the air was too thick, and fear started creeping into my body. I said I was sorry, though I wasn't sure why I was apologizing, and before driving away I said, "I don't think I can help you." For a moment she didn't let go of the window, but then her fingers slipped away, and without another word, I drove off into the night. I never thought much about it again, at least not until later. The more I thought about it, the more I wondered if she was in some kind of trouble, or if it was a trap. I'll never know what was going on with that girl, But I don't think I'll ever forget her eyes, and the way she just stood there in the rain staring at me like I wasn't even there. It was a crisp autumn night when I decided to go for a hike. I needed to clear my mind, and being out in nature always helped. It was a fairly easy hike that I had chosen to do, just a quick evening hike. I parked my car at the trailhead, grabbed my backpack, and started up the path. The trail was narrow but well marked. As I walked, I noticed a few people coming down, but there were no others on the path going up. An hour or so into the hike, I heard someone behind me. It was a bit unusual because the trail was wide enough for two people to walk side by side, but I was alone. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was someone who started later or took a different route. I quickened my pace a little, hoping to stay ahead of whoever it was. I glanced back occasionally and saw no one, yet the sound of footsteps followed me steadily. I tried to focus on the beauty of the hike, hoping that whoever was back there would turn off on another path. After another mile, I took a short break by a small stream. I sat on a rock, drank some water, and listened carefully. The footsteps had stopped. I felt a brief relief, but was still uneasy. I told myself it was probably just a coincidence, maybe someone on the trail who had their pace slowed down. I continued on as the sun was getting lower and shadows lengthened across the path. The feeling of being followed returned though. I'd hear footsteps, then silence. I would turn around and see nothing but trees and rocks. I could hear the footsteps clearly now, almost as if they were matching my pace. I picked up my speed, hoping to reach the summit soon. I reached a viewpoint where the trail widened a bit. I decided to stop and look over the valley below. I needed a break and hoped that whoever was following me might have stayed back. Suddenly, I heard a rustling noise behind me. I turned quickly, expecting to see someone, but there was nothing there. I thought I saw a shadow move among the trees, but it could have been my imagination. The sun was setting, and I knew I had to make it back before dark. I started down the trail, moving faster than before. The footsteps had returned, closer now. I was terrified, and tried not to look back, afraid of what I might see. As I rounded a bend, I saw a figure ahead of me on the path. It was a man, dressed in hiking gear. I called out to him, hoping that he was a fellow hiker who might have some information or could help. He didn't respond, just stood there, facing away from me. I approached cautiously, calling out again. The figure didn't move. When I was close enough to see his face, he turned around slowly. His expression was blank, and he didn't say a word. His eyes seemed distant, as if he wasn't really seeing me. I took a step back, really freaking out at this point. I decided to take another path that led off the main trail, hoping to avoid any further confrontation. I went faster, hearing the footsteps still behind me, but never quite seeing anyone. When I finally reached the parking lot, I looked back up the trail, but there was nobody in sight. I checked my car quickly and drove off as fast as I could. Later, I told a few friends about what happened, but they mostly shrugged it off as my imagination. Every time I think about that day, I can't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me the whole time. The memory of those footsteps, always just behind me, still haunts me. This story takes place in the fall of 2016, right in the heat of the whole killer clown thing that was going on for a while. My cousin and I were both in middle school at the time, and I was staying over at his house one night. There were quite a few people in the house that night, including us, my aunt and uncle, and my younger cousins. It will be easier to understand the story by explaining the layout of the house and yard first. They lived in a rather large double-wide trailer that they bought that was positioned on a flattened part of a hill. Their driveway is a rather steep gravel slope that connected to the road at the bottom of the hill. Behind the house and up the hill was nothing but woods. My cousin and I were the only ones still awake this night, watching TV in the living room. We kept hearing noises in the woods behind the house. We could see into the woods from the window in the living room where we were sitting, but we didn't pay much attention to the noises since it was kind of windy, Plus, my uncle had lots of motion lights outside the house. The motion lights were positioned in the back facing the woods, the side door close to the driveway on the opposite side of the house, and on the porch that overlooked the front yard and the road. Because of all the motion lights, we weren't too worried about anyone or anything being outside, since anything out there would trigger the lights. We had heard lots of stories and watched lots of YouTube videos about the whole killer clown thing that was popular at the time. Personally, I didn't think that it was real. I thought it was just prank videos. Also, we live in a small town in northeast Tennessee where everyone owned some sort of firearm, including my uncle. We were never afraid of anyone dressing up as a clown and trying anything. The only lights on in the house were the TV and the dim light up above the kitchen sink that was only a few feet behind the couch. Suddenly, the motion detector light in the backyard turned on. We noticed, but we didn't think anything of it. The lights were set on a 10-minute timer, and if it detected movement, it would stay on and turn off after 10 minutes if no other movement was detected. After 10 minutes, they went back off, so we figured that it was just an animal, which wasn't uncommon. After about 20 minutes, I went to the bathroom down the hall. I did my business and washed my hands. But when I came out of the bathroom, the motion light on the side of the house by the side door that entered into the laundry room turned on. I could see it shining through the thin blinds that were on the door. I heard what sounded like footsteps on the gravel outside, and then the doorknob started rattling quickly like somebody was trying to open it. Luckily, the blinds were shut, so whoever it was didn't see me. I ran back into the living room to tell my cousin. My cousin had heard the same thing I did, because he was already up and halfway into his dad's room to wake him up. At that point, I saw the light from the front porch come on, so I got up to look out the window that looked out to the porch, but I couldn't see anything. My uncle had quickly grabbed his pistol and a flashlight and was out on the front porch looking for whoever or whatever it was. My cousin and I were behind him on the porch watching. He looked around with the flashlight for a bit, and eventually we saw something. There at the bottom of the hill in the ditch by the road was someone dressed up as a clown in a cheap-looking costume. The clown was facing up the hill towards us, and it just looked at us and waved. My uncle fired a warning shot, and the clown ran across the road and into the woods. My cousin and I didn't sleep anymore that night, while my uncle stayed out on the porch for a few more hours to make sure that nobody came back. I don't doubt that it could have just been a high school kid playing a prank trying to scare whoever was in the house. After reading some more experiences with these clowns of people's lives actually being threatened and in danger, it still scares me to think of what the clown would have tried to do if he was able to get inside the house. This happened to me in the fall of 2020 during the COVID pandemic. My friend, who for the story I will call Jay, and I were on our way from New York to Michigan. We were going to do a couple of flooring jobs and also scout some potential properties to renovate and flip. We were using his work truck for the trip, which was a Ford F-150. We decided to leave in the evening and make the drive all night to get to our destination. Some of our trip was on a 2-lane highway that passes through the mountains of Pennsylvania. The highway is far from safe, with elevated mountain terrain with constant turns, and it snakes around a lot. Anyways, I was driving while Jay tried to get some sleep in the passenger seat. I stopped at a gas station to refuel and ran into the store really quick to get some drinks and snacks for the road. It was a little past midnight, and I noticed one other car refueling a few pumps away from us. It was a red or burgundy SUV, but I paid it no attention as I ran back to the truck. Fast forward 30 minutes later, and I was cruising in the left lane going 90 miles per hour. I noticed headlights behind us, and it was the same red SUV from the gas station. I first didn't think much of anything about it, but it dawned on me that this guy had been following me since the gas station. I decided to do a quick test to see if I was being tailed or not. Since I was going 90 miles per hour consistently, I slowed down to 70 and waited to see if the red SUV would pass me. The guy in the car also slowed down with me now, and I was on alert of being followed. I woke up Jay and told him of the situation. Jay is an ex-Army Ranger who is a lot more vigilant than me, and also crazier. Immediately he said, "That's the car from the gas station. I noticed the guy was looking at you extra hard when you passed by him." Jay, being who he was, wanted me to do more tests to figure out what was going on. He told me to switch lanes, so I did, and immediately the red SUV did so as well. Jay advised me to pull over to the shoulder of the highway and come to a complete stop, which I did. And once again, this psycho who was following me slowed down and parked behind us. Jay was fairly confident that this man had a firearm on him, because of the fact that he was confident enough to pull up behind us on the side of the highway. I quickly took stock with what we had in the truck that we could use as weapons. We had a hatchet and a machete, and each of us had a folding knife with us, but no firearms. Jay instructed me next to pull out quickly and gas the car back up to 90 miles per hour. I pulled off the shoulder and stayed in the right lane as I pressed down hard on the gas, but the SUV stayed right behind us now. Jay wanted me to brake check the guy so that he would crash into the back of us, then charge the SUV with a machete and a hatchet and hope for the best. That was very hardcore for me, and I told Jay we weren't going to do that. At this point, the man behind us wasn't an active threat yet, but if he tried to ram our truck or shoot us, then it would be a different story. I asked Jay if he could think of any other way that we could get this guy away from us. Jay looked around inside the truck and grabbed a high-powered handheld spotlight. He opened the back window of the truck and tried to get a good look at the guy. He turned on the spotlight, and I guess it shouldn't have been too surprising, but the guy's front windows were heavily tinted, so we couldn't get a look of his face. I had an idea, and I quickly swerved over to the left lane. As I did that, Jay turned on the spotlight again, hoping to see the man through his side windows. I briefly turned my head at the same time that Jay shined the light at the side of the SUV. For like 3 seconds we had him illuminated, and I will never forget the look of this guy. He was tall, at least 6.5 feet, because he was hunched over the steering wheel. If I had to describe what a crazy serial killer would look like, it was this guy. Just crazy hair, crazy eyes, and the most disheveled face I've ever seen. The light and darkness could have made it look worse than it was, but this guy looked very dangerous. Once the man saw that I wasn't alone, and he knew what we looked like, he exited off the highway at a truck stop rest area. To this day, me and Jay get into a debate about whether I should have brake checked the guy or not. He's under the impression that the guy was a serial killer, and that he would just end up finding another victim. I still stand on the side where purposely getting into an accident with a guy like that could go wrong in so many ways, and that it wasn't worth it. However, I agree with Jay that this guy's intentions were evil. Probably robbery at the minimum, kidnapping and murder at the worst. I'm just glad that we never had to find out, and I hope that nobody else has to deal with him alone.